Hi everyone. You know what time it is? It's 7:30. That means it's time to talk about finding our fairy tales. And to do that, we have to slay our dragons. Our dragons mean different things to all of us. They could be external or internal demons that we're fighting that are getting in the way of us achieving our best lives and living our dream. Tonight, I am so excited by our guest. Her name is Melanie Griffin. She is lawyer by day, may I say badass lawyer by day, and spreader of sunshine by night? By day? By every moment of her life. She's here ready to join us right now. And the exciting thing is she isn't afraid to talk about failure. And that is something that I'm super passionate about because, Melanie, we have to fail, we have to fall to succeed. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing great. It's pouring rain like it does this time of year in Tampa. It's
So it's
competing
gonna
with
be
us
like
a little
rain
bit.
sunshine tonight, right?
You are going to have to be our sunshine.
Well, I hope so. I hope we can provide that for you and your community.
I want to introduce everybody to you if they're not familiar with you yet. You are a lawyer, you're an attorney, but you also have launched a business that is essentially a movement. Spread Your Sunshine is about spreading positivity. It's a speaking platform. It's stationary because, hey, what's better than getting mail that says, you rock, you're amazing, I believe in you. And I love the notion of taking the time out of our busy lives to tell somebody that they matter, to tell somebody that you're impressed by them. And
Yeah.
so let's back into this with why you felt that was needed. What was going on in your life, in your career?
So at the time, what I saw a lot of is women who come to me for mentoring, and some of them are, our age, some are older, some are younger. A consistent theme was this fear of failure, and it just bothered me, especially because we've done so much work, I feel like, on the women's movement, and
Yes.
especially, it makes me sad when I hear about women in their 50s, 60s, 70s who have this fear of failure, but especially when I hear about, women in their teens, 20s, 30s, who are our younger generations. It's like, man, I wish we were further along, right? That they had this gumption to not experience the hurdles and mistakes that we went through. And so I realized that for me, although I'm a good lawyer and still enjoy practicing, that I need to find a way to really try to balance my career to spread my sunshine, so to speak, and get others to spread theirs, because that was my unique gift, that I could impact the world in that way and hopefully help women with that message in a way that maybe other people, have a different talent or skill set. So it was really a wake up call to how I need to spend my time.
It's really interesting when something takes over your mind so much and you find yourself mulling over. And that's very much what happened with this idea of Find Your Fairy Tale. And then when I found out that you were local to Tampa, I mean, now, sure, you can't be sitting beside me. Thank you, COVID. But it's amazing to think that there are so many people out there who really want to do the same thing, which is to empower others. What
Mhm.
happened in your own climb, in your own journey to reach your dreams that made you step back and say, you know what? We need to take time out to nurture ourselves and our friends and to take that pause to say, hey, what is the thing that's shining today in the sun?
I think at least part of it for me was twofold. Is that one, when I founded Spread Your Sunshine around 2017, I personally was having a really hard time. I had just lost my granddad, who was like my dad my whole life. I adopted a son, which was a very joyous occasion, but we only had about 10 days notice. And so
Wow.
that obviously, I was the sole managing shareholder. I was the sole shareholder in my office at that point in time for the law firm that I worked for then. And so there were all these things going on where maybe other people in the community thought that I was quote unquote a rock star, or, had this fairy tale life. But I felt inside like I was failing. And so then to compare that as well to this idea of what others see in themselves that makes me sad is that, and I did go ahead and bring some samples tonight, but as you know, like you mentioned, we make Spread Your Sunshine stationery and inspirational
Yeah.
products. And all of our products say things like, you are changing the world, you go above and beyond. And so they're all congratulatory and empowering. And over 50% of the time that I send these messages, they don't say, I'm sorry you lost your election, or I'm
Yeah.
sorry last night's TV show didn't go well for you on air. They all say, no, you are amazing. And over 50% of the time, despite that, the message that I get back is, I did not know that. Or, you know, I was having such a bad day. I barely got through the week, but thanks to you and your pick me up, I really feel like I can succeed. And so that was a real wake up call for me, that you hear that we don't walk in the shoes of others or know what they're experiencing. But that is so true. And that's how I had to really hands on learn that lesson is, again, you know, here I think you're a rock star, you know, a TV anchor, you have your own book, but I don't know what you're feeling inside. And so just this time to actually empower others can make such a difference, and especially for women and what they're able to accomplish and how they believe in themselves.
Yeah, it was a wake up call because, you know, I'm very open about things like the things that we're not supposed to talk about, like your age or your weight or your whatever. You know, I'm like, own it, wear it, live it. So when I turned 40, I was like, all right, this is a big birthday. I'm gonna go and look back on everything that I've written to myself on my birthday and celebrate how far I've come. And I realized I had been so hard on myself. The things that I had written to myself in these journals of poetry were not nice. And that was actually the impetus behind launching Find Your Fairy Tale. I realized I was feeding myself these poison apples. And I think from your story, you were doing the same thing. You were achieving things by day that you were then questioning and doubting by night and saying, why didn't I do this? I could have done that better. And I think that a lot of us struggle with ambition and feeling like we are enough. And there's a phrase for it that I actually only learned in the last year called imposter syndrome. Let's talk about that a little bit. What is it?
So you use the word enough. It's one of my favorite words as well when describing imposter syndrome. In essence, you don't feel like you're enough. You don't just deserve a seat at the table. You don't deserve the accomplishments or credentials. What's interesting, if you study imposter syndrome, is that it manifests in multiple different ways. So for me personally, I don't quote unquote have traditional imposter syndrome. I would say the most common type is, you know, you are nominated, say, for an award and you don't think you're deserving.
Mm-hmm. Melanie, I think we got you in slow motion. I don't know if it's my connection or yours, but if you do stay frozen, I'm just gonna have I'll uh, have you call back in because I think that might reestablish the signal because the thunderstorms of Tampa are trying to eat us. Now I see the white circle, which means she might be coming back. But Melanie, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna hang up on it. Melanie for a quick second. Yeah, guys, there are massive, crazy thunderstorms going on right now, and I just lost Melanie because she froze, and she was about to talk about imposter syndrome. So I think that that is something that I want to really dig into because she was saying that it's the feeling that you aren't not enough and that you don't deserve to be where you are. And for many people, I think it's those who have fought extremely hard to be where they are. And I want to talk about why we get stuck in that trap of not believing that we are enough. Melanie has an interesting story because not only does she create this stationery, which I love as a writer. I think it's amazing to take time to do the written word and to tell somebody that you care. It just means so much in this crazy world of technology where, you know, we lose our friends that we're talking to on Instagram live feeds. Hey, welcome back. What's going on?
Sorry.
It happens. It happens. The thunder tried to eat your sunshine. Stop it. Knock it off. So we were talking about imposter syndrome, though. And this is so interesting to me because what I was saying while you were logging back on, sometimes it's the most ambitious people and it's those highly successful people that are suffering from it the most.
Yeah. So going back to there being several different types where it really hit me that this could be a problem. I was sitting at a women's conference in 2016 and they started talking about perfection and how a lot of times perfection is a cover up because you're trying to be so perfect that you actually suffer from imposter syndrome. You don't want to be called out as a fraud or, you know, answer the question incorrectly. And I had never equated.
I feel like the broadband is trying to eat you. I joke about, you know, I say that we need to fight our dragons, but apparently the dragon tonight is our internet connection and the storm that is fighting with us. I'm going to give it a second just to try to reboot. But guys, everyone who's listening, I mean, the idea behind imposter syndrome is that we feel like we don't belong, and it's something that many people do to themselves, and that they hold themselves back. How many times have you been like, you know what, I really want to go in and happen if I go in and my boss thinks that I don't deserve it? Is he going to think less of me? Is he going to think that I'm presumptuous, or I'm entitled to something that I'm not? So there are tactics and there are ways to go about lifting yourself up and knowing your worth and understanding that you deserve to keep fulfilling your dream without superseding, you know, your expectations and coming in higher than you think you deserve. So the point with imposter syndrome is you are an imposter if you don't believe in yourself. You are an imposter if you don't think you deserve it. So instead, what you're doing is you're projecting your own insecurity on other people, and you're thinking, well, they're going to say that I've overstepped. They're going to say that I don't deserve that raise. They're going to say that I think I'm so much greater than I really am in real life. And really, what is that? Really, what is that? That is you second guessing yourself. And this is a huge problem. I have a comment right now from one of my dear friends, Jody. She says this is runs more rampant with women than men. And there have actually been a lot of studies out there that show that when a man goes in to ask for the raise, and then they'll ask questions like, do you think you deserve this? Oh yeah, I do. Whereas women are almost apologetic. And we've talked about this with the women's empowerment movement, that you have to, in your heart of hearts, know that you are equal and you deserve the same salary. I mean, there have been so many studies that show that we are still getting paid less, and that we are still scared to ask to be compensated adequately. So when that's an ongoing problem and pervasive in society, it's got to come from within, but it's also got to be a concerted strategy, I guess I could say. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit tonight. And this isn't about being male or female. It's about the different I guess mountains that we all face in our climb, right? So how can we learn from each other, and how can we teach confidence to each other? It's really interesting. And another friend of mine here, Brittany, she says, you know, I want to follow up. What she say? She says, women say, I just wanted to follow up. Men say, I'm following up. Just. I'm so glad, Brittany, thank you. I'm so glad that you used the word just. I have to tell you something about about when I published my first book. My editor emailed me and she said, Sorboni, you have the word just in your writing like 767,000 times. And really, I'll look up the number. I'll share it with you. I'll read you her letter tomorrow on on Instagram on one of my stories, because I'm curious now. I want to say it was like 400, 700 times just. And the reason that I was putting just in my writing is because I didn't believe that the sentence that I was writing held the meaning in of itself. You know, he was tired. He was just tired. She was just over it. She was over it. If you delete the word just from your sentence, you've deleted that insecurity. You've deleted that pause. You've deleted that feeling of inadequacy. So if you delete it from your writing and your sentences, imagine what you can do if you can delete it from your entire life. And I think that that's what's important about finding your fairy tale or spreading your sunshine, like Melanie Griffin likes to do. So Melanie is not only an entrepreneur, she's a huge believer in women's empowerment. And I know that thunderstorms are trying to fight and keep her out. But that's the craziness of going live on Instagram. And you know what the cool thing is, though, guys, about COVID and the pandemic, because we have to find the silver linings, is I think we've all gotten so used to the strangeness of technology, talking to a screen, connecting to each other like this, waiting for technology. Can I tell you, when I was anchoring full-time at home, I'm now back at the studio part-time, but when I was right here for a good 2 or 3 months, I I spent every single commercial break crawling around on the floor, plugging things in, unplugging things, rebooting the live shot, just then popping back up and being like, hey guys, the news starts now. And I remember at one point, my husband came up and he said, hey, you got a piece of hair, you know, sticking up. And I was like, no, You think I'm crawling around on the floor between the live shots because that is what it takes to do things outside of the box. But we've all been forced out of our comfort zones by the pandemic, and I think that that is um, not necessarily a terrible thing. We've learned how to create friends in different ways. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry, guys. Melanie is struggling to rejoin. I'm getting the little alert that said she's unable to rejoin. I don't know if that's her signal. I don't know if that's the weather. But let's just roll with this a different way. If you want to hang out with me, I would love that. So let's talk about, some of the things that we were going to dig in with Melanie, and then we'll get her back as soon as we can tonight, or another night if we have to. We'll just rebook her and get her on here to pick her brain a little bit. But the gist of what we wanted to talk about tonight was not being scared to fail. And she has said that failing is essentially a plot twist. And I have to say I loved that as an author, because what is a plot twist other than the most interesting part of the story? A story with no plot twist is incredibly boring. We don't want that. We don't want it to be expected. We don't want to say, oh, she's going to wind up with him. He's going to go there. They're going to get the house. This is going to happen. But we don't watch. Why do we want to watch our own lives unfold in a predictable way if that's not what we like to do when we're entertained and kicking back and reading a book or watching a movie? So I'm going to see, let's see, my request is under Spread Your Sunshine. Where are you? I'm going to, go live with Spread Your Sunshine. Please come back to me. As much as I will hang out with all these fun people here all by myself, I would much rather prefer you to be here. Hello.
So,
are you here?
Speaking
Will you
of
stay
failures,
with me?
can you guys hear me? Speaking of
I
failures,
can.
as I like to say,
It
the
seems a
blonde
lot
wheel,
better.
I forgot to turn the Wi-Fi on my phone.
Oh, so there's that.
So I think we should have, fingers crossed, their time's a charm. I think we should be in business now. I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. Technology is the smallest of dragons that we have to slay, right?
Well, the biggest these days, but thank you for being forgiving and gracious about it.
No, we're waiting. I've just been telling them my version of what I think it means to suffer from imposter syndrome. And I've told them, I was telling everybody funny stories about how I've spent basically the last 3 months crawling around on my floor trying to dial in live shots and plug in things that aren't working and be my own tech support.
It's a full-time job. Yeah, I love the hair flip. That was awesome.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was great. When I didn't even know that's how I'm doing the news. I'm like, well, I'm here, guys.
I showed up.
I'm here. So I want to get back to the idea of enough, because you said that was a really important word to you, and the notion of feeling like enough. What was a point in your life where you felt like you weren't enough, and how did you then counter those dragons, those demons?
So, this actually is a real recent story, but I went to dinner with one of my best friends from college about a week ago. And what I felt terrible about was that I was expressing this feeling that from 2020, so many of us have hopes and dreams that haven't come to fruition, especially as small business owners. And so the joke that I've seen, I think, on social media is this, I'll use the politically correct word for your show, but this stuff wasn't on my vision board this year. And so, I was talking about that and just saying, I wish that, things had gone differently, and I didn't feel like I was where I wanted to be with different projects in my career. And literally I made a man start crying at dinner. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. And he said, I just wish you could see me through your eyes. Like, I wish you knew that you were enough, that what you've done is enough, and why isn't it for you? And it just struck me that, here is this really good friend I'm upsetting because he sees all this potential, and I'm pushing back saying, but I don't. And so even though I live this message all the time and try and teach it to others, I like to say it is a practice, not a perfection. And so some of my go-tos when I really realize that I'm not on the right track and that, I am giving myself a hard time, but the number one thing I think you can do is to talk to others. And so many of us think about our imperfections, or what we perceive as our imperfections or failures, and we don't ever open up to anybody else because we're embarrassed, or we fear that we'll be judged. What will they think of us? And yet, if you take the time and you have the courage to share, then just like you sharing your hair flip, some people might be embarrassed by that. I think it makes you relatable and awesome and authentic, right? And I bet I'm gonna get some thumbs up with all the viewers who are here today. And so, that's for me, in addition to educating myself and consistently listening listening to various, you know, podcasts and Instagram lives and the fairy tale stories. But, you know, just kind of feeding myself, you know, with that good energy. Those are two of my biggest things that I come back to. And the one that I struggle with is sometimes opening up to people. But every time I do, I always am so grateful.
I think it's hard because we're taught at a very young age to hide weakness and be strong. And you could take that back to the beginning of time and just having to survive in a tough world and a tough environment if you want. What I love that you've said is that failure, you can't look at it as the end of something. It's a plot twist. And while you were reconnecting, I was saying I loved that so much because a plot twist is what makes the story interesting. We would be so boring if it was beginning, middle, end. I mean, what makes a good story, right? It's like, oh, I think it's going that way, but whoo, what? So,
Yeah.
so how do you address failure? How do you counter? What are some actual tangible steps that we can take when we're feeling insecure? We're going in to ask for that raise. We're saying, hey, maybe I want to step back from this career and go after this crazy dream that I've always wanted. How do you break that down into tangible goals?
So I think that those are maybe kind of two separate questions, but in terms of, you know, dealing with failure, I think that one of the biggest things you can do is one is give yourself a little bit of time to grieve. And when I say a little bit, it's subjective.
Yeah.
You know, it can be a week for someone, a day for someone else, 2 years for someone else. I joked with someone the other day that I was giving myself 5 years to be mad at something, and I was a year into it, and they said, how's that going for you? I was like, I think I'm on track for feeling better about it in 4 years, so we're doing good. But my point is that sometimes I think that especially as women and as men as well,
Yeah.
we feel this need to tell everybody that we're okay. And it's okay to grieve a loss and feel sad about it, even if you know it's because you are meant for a higher purpose. I still think there's a time to grieve. Number two is that dwelling on what went wrong isn't going to help. You have to look at it and say, I think at least one or two things is, one thing is, you know, what can I learn from the situation? If it's something where you do feel like you could have done something different, then looking at that and saying, you know, what could I have done differently? What will I do the next time? And not just harping on it. You know, sometimes I think there are times where we could not have done something differently. We really did give it our all and it didn't work out. And one of the things that I have really worked on there is recognizing that not everything I can be in control of, and that it did not work out for a reason. And I can't see that reason right now, but that I am just not meant to pursue that opportunity. And I'm not just saying that to make all of us on this Instagram live feel better. I truly mean that, because every disappointment that I have had career-wise, it didn't turn around immediately, but within a certain period of time, at some point, I recognized why my path, you know, went a different direction than what I originally envisioned. So not dwelling, learning, and just giving up that control of you really wanted it, but there's some reason it didn't work out, I think are three things that'll really serve people well.
I completely agree. And I like that you said give yourself time to mourn. And I think that that's really important, is it is okay to be disappointed, and it's okay to even be mad at yourself for a little while. I don't know, Melanie, 5 years, you're still being hard on yourself. But the 5 years, I hear you on that too. I'm sure there's things that I've kicked myself for years and years. But I also like the fact that sometimes that anger can fuel you. Sometimes that disappointment can turn you right into the lap in the other direction. And you can take off and use that as your fuel to do it differently, instead of wasting your time wallowing and saying, I didn't achieve that.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it, like, to your point, it just takes up that mental space. And so I think you have to have a game plan for when your brain starts to go there, what are you going to do to get back on track? Because there's no changing the past. You can change what you're going to do in the future. And again, it likely is something that you're better suited for, of how you're going to contribute to the world.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, because I've noticed that you have a secret skill of making things in sets of threes. You give three rules for everything. So to get back on track, are there three things or a couple things that you can come up with when you are veering off track and being hard on yourself? What are some ways that people could maybe talk to themselves, some questions that they could ask to get themselves back on track?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the first thing is you mentioned that having a nice inbox or a nice box, whether it's, electronic these days or whether it's tangible. I definitely have a nice emails folder. Being an attorney, you get a lot of nasty grams, right? All the nice ones, I've kept for the last 14 or so years so that I could remember on those hard days. I thought this was really sweet. One of the associates that I worked with, her boyfriend, for their 1 year anniversary, ended up getting her cards from all of her friends to open one at a time on days that she was having a tough day. What a great gift to give someone, right? And tell them how special they are and organized. It's something that's not expensive these days too. So I just thought that was so cool. So having something that you can, really look at that reminds you. I think too, goes back to education. For me with Spread Your Sunshine, and I don't think this is a coincidence, that there's a statistic that I think it's approximately over 40% of people don't read another book after high school. And there is a considerable amount of people that don't read after college either. And I fell into that category. I was so embarrassed professionally when people would ask me what my favorite book was early on in my career, actually up until the last 2 years. And I had to say People magazine because I honestly did not read anything else. And so the last 2 years, and I know this is not new, everybody on here is listening electronically, but so many people had told me about Audible books and TED Talks, things that you could listen to online, and I just
game changer.
And so for me, when I started listening to those things in 2018, not only did it help me mentally with my mindset, but that's also when my career took off, especially in terms of Spread Your Sunshine and my ability to impact people. So listening to other people's stories and learning from that, don't be afraid to tune into things like this. It really makes a difference. And then the third one, I won't beat a dead horse, but I will because we all need reminding, is to again open up and talk to someone, because I know recently for myself there have been things that, like I said, I didn't do as well as I wanted to in my career, and I think, oh gosh, if I tell X, Y, or Z, they're gonna judge me. And instead that person ends up saying, oh yeah, I made that mistake, it's not a big deal, I got past it. And so all this judgment that we build up inside our heads, it doesn't actually happen. But man, I don't know about you, but I feel so relieved when I realize that I'm not alone. And the only way you can talk through something or realize that you are part of a community is to open up and share and get those feelings out.
For everybody who is looking at you, their neighbor, their coworker, and thinking that they have it all, I think that when you start talking and you realize that there's just this basic human condition of doubting whether you are living it right, and then you can help each other by talking about it. And that's why I love conversations like this. I want to talk a little bit about your business though, and launching something from scratch. I love getting a handwritten note. I do. And I've often thought, wow, I love this little phrase that I came up with, or this little doodle that I got from my mom. What would it be like if we can just like print these mass and just send them to everybody that I love. Tell me about taking the idea of a handwritten note and that feeling of just personal attention and turning it into a business. Because a lot of people, it's one thing to talk about these big things, right? How do we feel? And I could talk about that all day. So sometimes I like to take it the other way and say, okay, everyone's like, all right, Sorboni, that's great. We all have big dreams. We all want our fairy tale. Now, what do? Pen to paper. I want to launch a business. What are some questions that somebody should ask? Because another big tier of your platform and what you're passionate about is helping small businesses succeed and brainstorm in the right ways and plan.
Yeah. A couple of things I will tell you that have really helped me. And I was actually reflecting on this today, and this is serendipitous because you mentioned turning 40. My 40th birthday is coming up in about 2 weeks. And I tie that to this conversation because when I launched Spread Your Sunshine in 2017, it launched in April or right about then. And when I say it launched is when I started it. So I kind of did this soft launch, and my goal was to do a hard launch for my birthday in 2017, 3 years ago. And it wasn't until this year, really 2020, that all the things that I talked about doing in 2017 actually came to fruition. So to your point, you talked about Spread Your Sunshine kind of being like a movement. For the first 22 months that I had a website, it literally said site coming soon. And now I look back and I wish I had, chosen a different phrase, like site isn't coming soon. It's going to be a really long time. You're going to be waiting. But my point is, it didn't deter the project from growing. And if you had told me that's what was going to happen, I would have never launched it. But because I did, I got to see the beauty and things taking so long. And it still grew, and it was imperfect and it was messy, but that's still awesome. At the same time, from a business perspective, sometimes you have to get cash coming in the door, right? Like sometimes you don't have 3 years. And so I think recognizing that things always can take longer sometimes than what you think or want them to is a good thing to keep in mind, because one of the things that I am passionate about is highlighting not only my own personal failures, but those of others. For this reason is that when you listen to a lot of the big podcasts, right, they are always interviewing someone who's at the top of their game. And a lot of times I feel like those people seemingly got to the top of their game overnight. Whereas growing a small business, most people you talk to give themselves a runway of at least 12 to 36 months. And I would tell you that I actually sometimes think, that they may be fibbing on when that 12 to 36 months started, meaning that sometimes I think they did a lot of the back end, setting up their social media, setting up their website before they started the start, right? And the start was when they actually launched potentially. Because I look at these people and I'm like, there's just no way that you got that up overnight. Or you had a lot of help, or you had a lot of capital, right? So thinking about that, and I think being okay with where you are and celebrating the moment, like I said, it can take a little bit longer than what you might think.
A lot longer. And I think, especially for someone like me who's in a deadline driven business, you have to be live at the end of the day or you didn't do your job.
Right.
So deadlines have been a huge part of my life. And I use those as challenges and mile markers and ways to keep myself motivated in my personal life too. I'll say, okay, you have a deadline. You have to finish, this book by such a date. You have to sell it by this date. You have to, launch this show by such a, and it's interesting because I finally just kicked back and I said then on Tuesday when I was talking to our guest Sheena Melanie, who's a singer who has now kind of created this amazing comedic performance as well. It popped out. I said, sometimes you find the fairy tale and sometimes the fairy tale finds you. And that stayed with me. And I was thinking about that over the course of yesterday and even today, is sometimes what you're meant to do finds you, and you just have to be open to it. So you were saying that, you're in kind of a cutthroat industry. I think it's fair to say that news and law, and it can be pretty tough. And all of a sudden you said, you know what? I would like to spread sunshine. What is it that made you decide that was necessary?
So for me, going back to, I've heard so many entrepreneurs say this that have become parents, is that for, those of us, who are parents, for me, for several years, we did not have our child until we were 37. And so I had a lot of time in my career to first become an equity partner and work on big projects. And my concern that I've heard a lot of professional women who have delayed starting a family, whether that's because of something that's happened, they haven't been able to get pregnant right away, or they've purposely chosen to delay that plan. And I myself included, I was so worried that if I had a baby, that my life would quote unquote go away. And instead what happened, and this is where I heard other female entrepreneurs and other male entrepreneurs as well, who are parents, say this, is that your life doesn't go away, it comes into focus. And so while you may not be able to take on the same number of projects, at least for a certain period of time, depending upon how you want to parent and how present you want to be, doesn't mean you're doing nothing. It just means that you might be doing intensified things or getting your work done in different periods of time. And so for me, having Maverick certainly was a catalyst, as well as because of everything that was going on in my personal life, it rolled over into the professional. And I just did not have a great experience practicing law that last year. And then conversely, like you said, the fairy tale sometimes finds you. When I gave my first, what I would consider to be major keynote address, it was in January of 2018. It was the first time that I did a major kickoff for an organization that was outside the practice of law or in any way related to the practice of law. And I posted about it online, and it just went from there. I don't want to say viral, because it certainly wasn't viral, but what I would say is that it snowballed, that slowly over time, the opportunities just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's when I really realized that, again, while certainly I still enjoy having a legal practice, and especially this past year, it complemented Spread Your Sunshine in a lot of ways that I could have never imagined. So sometimes they work hand in hand. At the same time, I realized I couldn't I could no longer spend 100% of my time practicing law, because that wasn't for me my what I felt to be my best skill set. That my best skill set had to be some time spending on Spread Your Sunshine, and it was that imbalance of time where that project kept growing at the same time that the others weren't joyous, that I really realized what I needed to do as my true life calling and passion.
You know what's interesting? I think somewhere along the line, we think that success, we confuse success and struggle, because it's very much a struggle to succeed. And so then when things start to get easy or feel right, or you're coasting, you sit there and you're like, oh wait, I must not be doing something right because this is too easy. But from what you're telling me right now is, when it's the right fit, it really is the successful move, because it shouldn't feel so hard. It should be that thing that feeds your soul, and it should be that thing that lets you just, go flying down the hill.
One caveat to that though, and I partially agree with you, but to expand on it, there's a book that I read, High Performance Habits by Brendan Bouchard. And I don't know if you remember, he talks about one of his characters, and he talks about how professionals, particularly if you've been in your profession around 10 to 12 years, 15 years, we start to get bored. And when we get bored, we don't perform as well. And we're used to being high performance habits, high performance professionals. And so all of a sudden, the things that used to be easy for us, like returning an email or picking up the phone and calling someone back, all of a sudden become really difficult, because you're not 100% invested, but you don't know why, if you haven't read this book or something like it. And so you then make your own situation worse, right? Because you are not only, you're not performing because you're bored, but then beyond that, now you're not even doing your job well. So now all of a sudden you have two things that are compounding, that are making you a C student when you used to be an A student, right? And so what I mean by that is, part of my hesitation with forming Spread Your Sunshine, in addition to just, it took a while for it to come to fruition and really realize what it even was and what it meant and what I'd be working on. But beyond that, it also was this realization that it would take an inordinate amount of time to start something from scratch. Yeah. And so it is super hard every day. I mean, I can't imagine the hours that you're putting in right now, getting the Fairytale off the ground, right? Every
but
single
it's
thing.
fun. It's fun.
It's fun.
To your point, yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
so it can be challenging. It's just a challenge that's joyful.
Yeah, I always, my number one fan is always probably going to be my parents, and my mom was kind of checking in on me. She's probably watching right now. Hi, but she was checking in. And she's like, do you have time for this? And I was like, yeah, I really do. I surprisingly do. And I found that it didn't take up the time of the important things. It's taking up the time that I was wasting. Instead of scrolling online and just getting sucked down some random search and reading something, or I don't even know, what do we do online? Just getting lost in the abyss. I'm learning about interesting people. I'm reaching out to people who inspire me. I'm listening to the guests that I have booked, listening to all of the speeches that they've given before, and learning about them. And whatever comes of this project, for other people, I hope they get out of it as much as I am, because I've learned so much in 2 weeks? I mean, you're part of the inaugural crew, so thank you for being brave enough to come and hang out with me while we're doing this. So I think the takeaway that I've gotten from even just these 2 weeks is that people are scared to fail, but everybody that I'm talking to is saying, don't be. Look at it as one of my guests said, don't consider it happily ever after that you're searching for. Consider it happily along the way. Gilly Siegel, she's an author, and I love that, happily along the way. And I think that what you're saying too is not only that, to spread that happily along the way, you have to take the time to tell each other that you're being amazing. You did something awesome. You're incredible. What do you get from that feedback? Because it's not just about feeling joy in your heart. It's about spreading it.
Absolutely. There, one of the most meaningful cards that I personally ever received was from a mentee. And afterwards, after the experience, he shared with me, he sent me this card, and it said, I had been on something like 17 job interviews, and I was convinced that I was no longer meant to be a lawyer. Now, this was someone who had just graduated from law school, just invested 3 years and Lord knows how many $1,000, right, in this process. But after 17 failed job interviews, he said, I just was convinced that I wasn't meant to be a lawyer. And then I met you at a College of Law alumni reception, because recent graduates are invited. And he said, he said, yeah, I have all these questions. And I said, listen, it's going to be difficult for me to answer all of them in this setting without, you know, being distracted and noise. Come to my office first thing tomorrow and we'll sit down for an hour and we're going to get you set up. And he said, you were my Hail Mary, you know, that you made it happen. And here I am practicing law now. And I'm so happy. And so I didn't do anything in my mind in particularly special. Sure, I shared some expertise and some job hunting strategies that had worked for me and for others that I had worked with. But by no means when I met him did I have any clue that this student was about to, or I guess graduate lawyer was about to give up and really his dream profession that he had worked so hard for and invested in. But that is the power that we have. And similarly, you know, when he sent me that note, he did for me what I did for him. It made me realize, wow, my time that I spend with, you know, students and recent graduates and professionals isn't in any way wasted. I may not be making an impact on everyone, right? You're not going to hit 100% out of the park, but you know, the time that I give is valuable and is helping people. So yeah, absolutely giving feedback. I think, you know, one other anecdote is that when I first started practicing law, a lot of male lawyers, and I'm generalizing, I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody on your show, but they're not going to give you a star, right? No news is the good news. And I just really realized how much I crave that feedback. And it's not that I mean at a girl, I also want the criticism as well, or the, you know, the constructive. How can I grow from this? But I think that silence is just, you know, it's not something that most of us crave. We like to get that feedback. And so just knowing like, wow, like what you're doing is just awesome. I love this project. I love what you stand for. And I mean that, I'm not just saying that because we're sitting here talking, but it really is what will lift you up and then allow you to keep going.
I think that's really interesting too, because if, let's just say you and I were having this conversation in a room with a live audience, we would be able to see people's reaction. We'd be able to see their faces. We'd be able to take their energy with us. But there's, you know, even in technology, there's a cool thing happening. You know, when people like what you're saying, the little heart goes up the screen, you know, you're like, oh, good. Or somebody will clap. And I think that even in this small forum, in this small way, you know that something that you're saying resonates, and that's going to give you energy into tomorrow. And hopefully what you said that led to that clap and that heart is going to be something that someone can take away from here. When it comes to slaying the dragons, those voices that come up, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the hour, the imposter syndrome, the voice that says you are not enough and you don't deserve this. Are there steps that you can take to question yourself? Can you say, what are some things that you do? Do you say, hey, why am I thinking this? You know, I could go into journalist mode, right? Who, what, where, when, why? Who made me feel this way? Why am I feeling like this? When was the last time I didn't feel like this? But what are some questions that you ask yourself when you start to go down that slope?
A couple of things that I ask myself. One is, could I have done anything differently? Was there something differently to do in the situation? Because a lot of times the answer to that question is there are still things that you could do to improve your situation, right? And so if you look at something and you're like, man, that didn't work out as intended, and there's nothing left right in the pipeline, then maybe it truly means that didn't work out how you wanted it to. But a lot of times, I tell this story, and I'm sorry for anybody who's heard it before, but speaking of selling stationery, went to my first trade show earlier this year, at the very beginning of the year. And I had some people who wanted to follow up, and their opportunities have come of it later. But at the time, I stood in my trade show booth for 5 days and didn't have a single sale. And it was the most humbling experience ever. But instead of standing there and, you know, crying or having a bad day, I reached out to other people I knew in the product space, because here I spent 13 years in the services space. I had never sold a darn thing. And so I asked them and I said, what could I have done differently? Like, do you see anything about my booth? And sure enough, one of my friends said, yeah, your table is in the middle, which means that people are worried they're gonna get trapped and they don't want to talk to you because they don't have space, right? Like, people don't want to feel trapped as a buyer. You don't have your space. Yeah. So, you know, for me, was it a failure? It was a failure in the sense that I hadn't asked enough questions, or I didn't even know I hadn't asked enough questions, right? It didn't mean that the actual experience, I should never do that again. So I think that analyzing, you know, starting to look at that in that frame of reference, that this didn't go as intended doesn't mean I'm not meant to do this. It just means that I need to ask some more questions or learn some other things. I also think sometimes that knowing your body is really good. So like for me, when
Okay.
I get overwhelmed, I get super tired. There's just no way around it. I am, you know, if I get tired, depressed, whatever, I mean, it is a function of, you know, something is bothering me. And so now that I know that about myself, instead of feeling frustrated that I'm tired, two things. One, I let myself sleep if I need to. I give myself that time. But two, I also try to find, and this may not sound childish, but I find a way to make work fun. So I'll tell myself something like, again, I clearly love sending handwritten notes. I'll be like, you know what, Mel? If you get out of bed, you don't have to start with the returning emails. You get to write 3 cards today. And just
I love that.
something to like put one foot in front of the other and get yourself going again. You know, what is quote unquote the treat or the prize? It's like when you went to the doctor when you're a little kid. I don't know about you, but my mom told me if I went and got my shots, I could have some ice cream. Well, as an adult, you deserve little prizes and treats too. And so I think finding little ways to celebrate and just make things more fun can also be a good tip and trick.
I love that idea. I mean, we do that for our children. Why don't we do that for ourselves? You know, hey, if you eat that broccoli, you know, when you have to, broccoli is pretty much the equivalent of sending out some really boring, mundane admin emails
Yep, yep. You got to do it.
until you grow up and you like it. I don't know if I'll ever like the admin, but you know, Mel, let me ask you about the writing of the cards themselves. Why cards? You know, why do you think that is your method of communicating? There are so many ways to empower people and let them know that you care about them. So why go back to an essentially old-fashioned way of connecting? What does it mean to you?
So for me, it is something I've grown up my whole life. I still remember when I think it was 8 years old, I spent my entire allowance on Hallmark cards for my family for the holidays. It's just, you know, my mom wrote them, my grandma wrote them. And so
Yeah.
it was just something ingrained. And I love the feeling that you get. Like, I think that I love surprising someone so much more than I love getting the gift. I know sometimes people say that, but I really mean it. It's just hearing that I made someone's day just really, like, it gets me going, it gets me jazzed. I love that. And so, and I'm going to tie this into another tip is that people oftentimes ask me and they'll say, I'm so jealous that you know, have this other side project that you work on and that you're not, you know, practicing 100% of the time. How did you figure out what it was you want to do? And a lot of times I think it's thinking about what do you already enjoy doing? And then if you want it to be a business versus a passion project, how can you monetize what it is you love? And so for me, I didn't intentionally start making cards to actually sell them. I'm even to give them away. And that's what I did for the first 18 or so months. I just gave them to everybody. I thought it was so awesome. I wanted them to empower others too. And so then I realized, I was like, hey, wait a minute. Like the thing that I love doing and have loved my whole life, like it's been sitting under my nose for over 3 decades. And I was just like, oh, but I have no idea what I do other than practice law or do this one thing. And so I think really kind of doing that analysis, or like you said, maybe sometimes it just comes to you. Thankfully, I was lucky enough to have that. But it just, you know, I think that, again, with the cards as well, they are a tangible reminder of something that when I talk to people, it amazes me the feedback I get for the people that have them in their office or on their desk or on their chalkboard. And they'll say, this is the one thing that I have that I decorate my office with that constantly gives me this boost. And I mean this sincerely. Like sometimes my best compliments come from those that I don't really know that well. Cause I'm like, how's my thing, the one thing in your office, you know, it didn't come from your mom or your brother or your sister or whomever. And
But
so
something resonated. Yeah.
that's the
Something
power that we
connected.
have to impact people. And so I do think that's the cool thing about the old school. And you mentioned it, like the admin is not fun for anybody. It's like, you know, no matter how nice an email is, there's still something dreadful a lot of times about going to your inbox, right? So
It's just a big mess.
Really special and they can keep it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite phrase that you've come up with that just is your go-to? I'm sure you love all your babies, but
yeah,
do you have
of course. So I actually, you know, I actually have them out. I'm going to show them to you really fast. So
yeah.
The
Show us.
is
Let's see
actually
them.
this one. So it's sent with love by someone who totally believes you shine. And so I've heard so many entrepreneurs say this is another tip is that get feedback and listen to your audience. So for me, I like this card. I think it's awesome. I send it to people. Not my favorite, but I'll tell you, it is our bestseller by far. And so, you know, you always want to be listening to people. And I've heard other entrepreneurs say that as well. The thing that they would have picked isn't the, you know, the fan or the customer favorite. So my favorite though is With Love and Sunshine, your number one fan. So I love telling people how much I love them and that, you know, I'm their cheerleader. I like to say that I'm the president of your fan club, things like that. Because a lot of times I do think that people just, you know, need that boost and to know that they have that cheering section.
What's next? What happens after this? Do you speak more? Do you write about it? Do you launch more cards and more ways to reach out? What's next?
So I actually am going to start a somewhat similar to you, but a podcast/show, so that you'll have the ability to look at it either way. So I'm actually recording the first set of those tomorrow, which I'm really excited about.
Well, that's fun timing.
Yeah, something I've been thinking about for a while. And that's where, you know, tying this whole interview together, that it was serendipitous, is that I realized that what I thought I'd be doing for my 38th birthday 3 years ago is what I'm doing for my 40th birthday this year. But it's all come together in the right timing of, you know, learning different stories and things that I can share. So yeah, working on that, working on, to your point, we're working on some of the card lines and other products in the back of the house, so to speak. And so just thinking about new people to partner with it's just going to be a really fun, I think, end of 2020, hopefully.
So is that the long-term fairy tale? What is your definition of happily ever after?
So, you know, I said this until recently, that my definition of happiness, that I would be speaking of Morgan Bars, who I know was helpful in setting up this interview as well. I said this one time at a Gals with Goals event that she hosted. I said, you know, I want to be Ellen DeGeneres when I quote unquote grow up. I don't know if I want to be Ellen DeGeneres these days. I know she's had some tough love the last couple of weeks, but I think whatever that means, whether it's on the Tampa scale, whether it's on the Florida scale, a national scale, but just the ability to continue to impact people and help them. And I think a lot of that is listening to not only your audience, but then also being able to change with the times. You know, for me, this upcoming week, and I look at this on my calendar because I kept it, but I was supposed to have had one of my biggest speaking engagements to date, celebrating the centennial of women's suffrage, and you know, being on a big stage, and said, I'm sitting here, and this also is awesome. I mean, I'm sitting in with an award-winning journalist virtually, and so I think just you know, thinking through the future, I think we can plan all we want, but sometimes we also have to continue to adapt to our circumstances and what's happening.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think I finally have been cured of the fear of missing out, of FOMO, because you worry when so much is going on, these big speaking engagements, this amazing opportunity that you had, if you had lost it for any other reason other than a global pandemic. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd be so upset. You know, whether it was something small in your own life or something happened to the event, it would be so unfair. But I find it for me right now, I'm able to let things go a lot easier. Even lost money, like, okay, they're not giving me those tickets back. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Do I want it back? Yeah, I want it back. You know? Yeah. But it makes you take a step back and say, I'm not going to stress out over the things that I can't control, and I'm just going to live in this moment right now. I remember I had a vocal coach once upon a time that I got sent to, and they told me that they needed my voice to be deeper. And I went, and she said, you don't need your voice to be deeper. You just need it to resonate and have it sound like you trust your own voice. She's like, people, when they get nervous, they go like this. They're like, oh. Yeah. So it was more settling into myself. And what she noticed was I was always saying, what happens next, and what I did then, and what next, and back and before and next. And she said, how about right now? What are you doing right now? And it all tied into bringing the shoulders down and believing in you can't adequately live in your own voice and yourself, and if you're thinking about this and that and not being here. So I love that you've been right here with us, and hey, this is a very small forum compared to where you are going to be, but I really think that your message was really, really important, and I know that people are going to watch it and get a lot out of it. If you could ask somebody about how they found their fairy tale, do you have anybody in mind?
So I thought about this because I was like, wow, I just love this concept of everything that you're doing. And so my quote unquote real answer, if you can get Kate Middleton, I am a huge royal fan.
Oh, sure. So, I'll just call her right up. I'm on it.
Yeah. But you know, in addition to that, I think it's the Checkers Rally CEO, who's one of the first women Fortune 500 CEOs, who's a female, and there was another female who was recently appointed by one of the cleaning brands. I'm blanking on it. Maybe someone will put it in the chat, but like Clorox.
Yeah.
But I think that having there's so few
Clorox
female
is headed up by a female
Fortune
CEO. Yes.
Fortune 500s, and the one who was most recently appointed, I think she's 42, and so it is incredible. I mean, that, you know, she's our age and here she is head of this conglomerate. And so I think just hearing about their business stories would just be phenomenal. And I think that's definitely, you know, I know you can work miracles, but maybe a little, I think that's totally within your realm.
Hey, we can, I mean, look, I'm going to go with Fortune 500 is a little more tangible than royalty. But that's really funny because if you had told me, look at what you just did here. But if you had just told me Fortune 500, I would have been like, are you crazy, Melanie? I can't, are you crazy? But when you were like, oh yeah, royalty, I did Fortune 500, right? I'm like, well, let's go with tangible because at least, you know, I'm not having to track down Buckingham Palace. So let's see what we can do. But no, I love that idea. I think to talk to women who have, I know, you know, you're also passionate about breaking the glass ceiling. Sometimes people want to pretend that the glass ceiling isn't there because there have been major strides in equality and we are catching up. But it's fair to say that the salaries still aren't comparable and the job where we are across, you know, in terms of heading big corporations, it's still not even. So let's talk to some people who are doing it.
Yeah, and see how they got there. I absolutely think that is so true. And you know, it's to empower you. One of the biggest lessons that I learned in listening to different entrepreneurs speak over the past year or so is that sometimes it is the person at the top that is the most responsive because they understand the power of mentoring and they want to provide that for others. And so just a quick story. I know we're getting close to an hour and probably ready to wrap up.
Instagram will say bye-bye, but we can fit it in.
Okay, I'll very quickly. But I had a girlfriend who actually ended up being in a national or internationally published syndication. And I said, how did you get there? And she said, well, I wrote to the publisher. And literally it was like writing to the editor of the New York Times. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah. She's like, you wouldn't, she goes, I wasted my time talking to all these like mid-level or bottom level, you know, employees or or managers. Not there's anything wrong with that. But she said, I finally just went to the head honcho who owned the paper and said, you know, I'd like to write. And she said, within minutes, there was an email in my inbox saying, here's the kit. And I look forward to your submission. And sure enough, it came true. And since I heard that story and have tested the waters, there are multiple people that I have that have told that type of tale. And so I think that honestly, that a Fortune 500 totally within grasp because those women know what it takes, and that is, you know, other people supporting them.
And we're all the same. You know, at the end of the day, we're all the same, and we all fight those same dragons, and we all question our path to our fairy tale, and we're constantly redefining what happily ever after is. So that's why it means so much that people are pausing and taking a little bit of time out of their night, their busy life to talk to me and talk to everybody who's tuning in about it. Melanie, thank you. It was so nice to meet you virtually, and I love that you're actually in Tampa. So once life gets a little bit more normal, I will find you. I will find you in real life.
Good. I hope so. And thank you for hanging in there. Sorry, guys, if you've been on since the beginning. Sorry about our technical issues.
They got stuck with me for a little while, but that's okay. I knew you were going to come back. I knew.
Good. Thank you.
Have a wonderful night.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. And remember, we are going to continue talking about how to slay your dragons. And we're going to continue to dig in to what it means to find your fairy tale. We're going to keep doing this 2 times a week, Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30. And our guests are always really interesting, and they offer a fresh perspective. And they come from very different backgrounds. Coming up next on Tuesday, we have Chef Jeff Philbin. He was on a reality show, a cooking reality show competition that he had actually never even seen, heard of, watched, bothered with before he suddenly was auditioning and found himself a finalist. And it set him up for an amazing career that he's going to take us through. And that'll be Tuesday, 7:30. And then on Thursday next week, we have national broadcaster Maggie Rodriguez. You probably will recognize her from CBS's morning show. And we can talk to her about her incredible journey. She experienced a lot. She was a trailblazer, to say the least. I'm very excited about those two guests, and I hope you'll join us for those as well. And in the interim, you know that I'll be popping up with lots of silly stories and lots of sparkles and unicorns and funny things and what I eat for breakfast. Tune into my stories, tune into my pictures, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. Bye.